Hello and welcome, and today we'll be talking about more car news and fewer used cars because there's lots of interesting things that are going to be happening this year. First things first, we're going to be taking a look at cars that are going to be discontinued for 2021. We talked about the Lexus GS before on some of our social media platforms. Kind of sad that the Lexus GS is disappearing, but of course, if a car doesn't sell very well, it only makes sense that a manufacturer will start to discontinue it. Now, with that said, in this list that we're taking a look at, compiled by Car and Driver, it's very clear there's a pattern going on, and see if you can spot it. Other cars that are being discontinued: the Acura RLX, Acura's flagship sedan. It's their full-size luxury sedan. Things like Cadillac CT6 is also being discontinued. Chevrolet's Impala is being discontinued. The Dodge Grand Caravan is finally being discontinued. That minivan came out in 2008, so it's about time for that thing to go away, especially since the Chrysler Pacifica is a far better minivan in just about every single way. Thank goodness the Dodge Journey is also being discontinued. That is an awful car. I don't know if you ever looked into it. Ford Fusion is also being discontinued as well. In more unfortunate news, the Shelby Mustang GT350 and the GT350R are also being discontinued because it's being replaced by the GT500, which is of course more powerful and faster and all that good stuff, but it doesn't come with a manual, unlike the GT350s. The Civic Si and the Civic Coupe, so the Civic Si Coupe and the Civic Coupe, are both being discontinued. Honda will no longer be selling a coupe version of the Civic, likely because the newer generation Civic is coming along. The Honda Fit looks like it's also being discontinued as well. The Elantra GT, which is the hatchback version of the Elantra lineup. We actually quite like the Elantra GT. It's a really cool shape. Jaguar's XE, which is their 3 Series competitor, their base model car. The XF Sport Brake is no longer being sold. Amazing that it even came to the US market, which is really cool. Lincoln Continental is also being canceled, and the Lincoln MKZ is being canceled as well. As you can see, there are lots of sedans are being canceled, and also lots of small cars are being canceled as well. The Toyota Yaris, which is the current generation Yaris, is actually not a Toyota. Technically, it's actually based on the newer Mazda 2. But people just aren't that into small cars right now, which is kind of surprising. But given that gas prices have kind of stabilized in the past couple of years, people are starting to lean more towards SUVs. And on that front, people are also leaning away from sedans as well. So kind of a bummer, but that's kind of good at the same time. I never understood the appeal of sedans. I'm not sure why we didn't have more wagons in the US. People just prefer sedans over wagons. Maybe it's a aesthetic thing. But I mean, wagons are just far more practical than SUVs, and they drive like a sedan. So I'm not sure where the disconnect is. But yeah, lots of sedans and very small cars being discontinued this year, which is kind of a bummer. Now, in the realm of electric vehicles, Apple has been rumored to bring an electric vehicle for an extremely long time, and lots of news recently has come out that they are, in theory, collaborating with Hyundai to do the building of their vehicle. And actually, even more recently, rumored is that Hyundai is handing off that project to their Kia division. Hyundai and Kia, of course, are both part of the Hyundai Automotive Group, along with Genesis. So that'll be quite interesting to see. There's still not many details about it. It's been a long rumor that Apple would build a car. The question is, though, and the most interesting question is, what is Apple's contribution to this? Are they doing the engineering of the car? Are they building it from the ground up? Or are they going to simply integrate their software and their user experience into the car? And I think it's really great that they're partnering up with an existing car manufacturer. It just takes a lot of R&D out of the equation. It just makes it a lot simpler in the grand scheme of things. When Tesla started building vehicles, there was a huge learning curve for them because, of course, the automotive industry is pretty well established and there's pretty high barriers to entry. And there's a lot of things that they had to learn and are still learning in terms of quality control, how to provide service, a lot of logistical stuff that, you know, even if you are a forward-thinking company, there's just some things that have to be done a certain way because that's just the way it's been set up. And it's great that that Apple is partnering up with someone like Hyundai, who has been in the automotive industry and who has probably figured out most of these things when they started building cars several decades ago. So that takes a lot of the initial learning curve out for them. But again, it's unclear how much Apple is going to contribute to this project. I have a feeling that they're going to be more contributing to the battery and the technology side of things, and in terms of the raw manufacturing, distribution, dealership network, all that other logistical stuff, I think Hyundai will handle. But it'll be interesting to see how that project goes. The rumors are saying right now that 2024 is when this car will be coming out, which is very soon if you think about it. So that's the potential Apple car with collaboration with Hyundai Automotive Group. In keeping with the theme of electric automobiles, you can look here at the NIO. I believe it's called ET7, and NIO is actually a Chinese electric car company, very huge over there. They actually hold the record, I believe, for the fastest electric supercar around the Nürburgring, which is pretty impressive for a company that most people have never heard of. Production car is also a bit of a stretch because I'm not sure how many they've actually sold. But anyways, NIO is a very huge electric car company over in China. Very impressive technology. They're coming out with a new sedan called the ET7, and it will supposedly have a battery pack all the way up to 150 kilowatt hours. Which is good for an estimated 621 miles of range. Now that's based on the NEDC cycle, which is a European, Asian market thing. The EPA cycle is a lot stricter, so typically for the same electric vehicle, the EPA cycle rates those same vehicles for a far lower range. It's got a lot of autonomous technology in it. It uses LiDAR scanners, cameras, looks like up to 33 sensors, which is a lot of sensors. So I'm not sure if this vehicle is actually coming to the US, but its design is really impressive. The interior is really open, it's very modern. I've actually been approached by a recruiter from NIO to potentially work for them. Unfortunately, since they are based in China, my Chinese skills aren't good enough to handle that, but it seems like they're doing well, and I believe they sell a lot of standard, regular, normal commuter cars, not supercars, in China. So they're very well funded in that regard, and probably pretty profitable as well. So that's something to keep an eye on. And we're really sticking with an electric vehicle theme here because we also have the 2021 Lucid Air. Lucid is, of course, another dedicated electric vehicle company. They've actually started opening stores and showrooms down in California, I believe, with kind of like a Tesla vibe, where they have like showrooms in the malls for people to kind of experience the car. And some people even call them like a Tesla ripoff. But their first vehicle that's supposedly coming out is the Air. It looks like it's supposed to launch this year. I believe they've already started pre-orders a while back, and it is a stunning looking car. Just extremely modern, got great range, got great technology. Really rooting for them, really rooting for all these dedicated electric vehicle companies that are pushing out this new category of vehicles, because this will be the future, and more states are actually starting to add regulations. The cars being sold in those states have to be fully electric by a certain year. So manufacturers won't be able to sell their gasoline vehicles in some states. It's really going to create some competition. I like that there's these new companies coming out that are pushing electric vehicles, and I'll explain that in a little bit when we take a look at a legacy auto manufacturer that's pushing out an electric vehicle, and you'll really see the difference in their priorities. But when you start a company from the ground up where its only intention is to build an electric vehicle, it's just different. They're just so much more focused, and they're so much more determined to make it work, rather than some company that's like, well, yeah, we gotta meet regulations. Let's go ahead and put an electric motor into our existing car, and it just never works. But the Lucid Air is very impressive. The specs and the performance look incredible if they can really pull it off. Like we talked about earlier, the barrier to entry in the automotive industry is really, really high. So for another car company to come out and trying to push a completely new category of cars, they're going to need a bit of luck on their side, and they're also going to need some good guidance. They're going to need people to make the right decisions at the higher up levels of how they're going to market this vehicle, how they're going to service the vehicle. Things like that are all very important, because it's not just about selling the car, it's the whole customer experience and journey that will keep people coming back and purchasing the vehicle. Other car companies that are also coming out with new vehicles include Rivian. They're famous for pushing out that electric truck concept. No current news on when their truck is going to come out. It's going to be pretty impressive though, spec-wise, and I believe they're partnered with Ford in testing vehicles. But there was a new article that came out that they're also helping Amazon build prime delivery vans, which is really neat. And if you think about it, that's a great way to really test out your technology, because, you know, shipping out electric delivery vans as fleet vehicles essentially, and if you have any type of like quality control issues, it's not as huge of a deal as upsetting someone that just, you know, spent $80,000 on a brand new car. If you have a fleet that has some issues here and there, it's a great way to kind of test it out, run it, basically beta test the vehicles and have them drive, thousands of miles and see what type of issues occur, and then apply what they learned there to a more consumer vehicle. And lastly, for news this week, we have an example of what happens when a legacy auto manufacturer tries to get into the electric vehicle game and isn't really that committed. We have the 2022 Mercedes EQA, and it's an electric SUV that's based on their GLA SUV. The EQA will offer 187 horsepower and 277 pound-feet of torque and is priced at the equivalent of $57,000. $57,750 actually, so almost $58,000. So we have an electric SUV that's probably about the same size as the Model Y, Tesla Model Y, if not smaller, and it has far worse performance figures. A couple other things here, even Mercedes says that the EQA, which is their electric version of the GLA, is about 2 seconds slower 0 to 60 than their gasoline counterparts, which is not good at that price range. It's unclear whether this will actually come to the US. I'm not sure who would buy this if it came to the US, just being honest with you. The numbers just don't make sense. They would have to offer a crazy lease deal in order to get people behind the wheel of something like this, but no one's gonna be buying this in cash. It's just insane. They do say though, it does have a range of 300 miles, but again, that's with the European cycle. So with an EPA rating, it's probably gonna be far lower than that. That cost, I don't know how many people can get behind that cost. It's awfully close to a used Model X for a car that's probably the size of a Model Y, if not smaller. So it's gonna be a tough sell. Now, this is an example of legacy auto manufacturers trying to build these electric vehicles, and I have a very strong suspicion that this was built to meet certain emission regulations in whatever parts of Europe where they're required to sell a certain amount of EVs in order to offset the emissions that are produced by the gasoline vehicles that they sell. And when you have that mentality in mind in building a vehicle, you're not focused on building the best electric vehicle. You're just trying to build something that's able to meet certain regulations, and it's the worst of both worlds. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll see how many of these legacy auto manufacturers are going to be jumping into the electric vehicle game as they try to play catch up essentially with existing manufacturers such as Tesla, that's been doing this for a far longer time and has figured out all of the ins and outs of building electric vehicles and also how to market these electric vehicles, right? There's still a huge amount of education needed for consumers to be able to understand how do they live with an electric vehicle, how do they get over the fears that they may have with owning an electric vehicle, things like that. Now for used vehicles this week, we only have two. First off, we have a 2007 Audi S4 Avant in yellow with the V8 engine with a 6-speed manual. Probably my preferred configuration. A lot of these actually came with an automatic, so that may deter some people, but this one comes with a manual. Very rare to find, of course, like we talked about, wagons aren't very common in the US. This one is currently at $11,000 with 7 days left to bid. I expect it to go significantly higher than that. These are very hot vehicles right now, trying to find something that's naturally aspirated, a wagon, and also manual. Super cool, definitely a car that I would be personally interested in due to its rarity. It's a very intriguing vehicle. Looks like it even has nice BBS alloys on it, which is very German. I appreciate that. I also want to own a European vehicle at one point. So this would be something that would be on my radar when that time comes around. And lastly, for used vehicles, we have a 1981 Delorean DMC-12 with only 28,000 miles on it and a 5-speed manual, currently with 19 hours left. So by the time you see this video, it would have already been sold. Current bid is at $33,000. I expect that to keep going up. Incredibly rare vehicles. I actually only recently learned about the development of the DeLorean. It's actually a really incredible story. Not in a great way, more of in an exciting and suspenseful way. Motor Trend has a new series out called Seduced by Speed, and one of the episodes is about the development of the DeLorean. Their show Seduced by Speed is actually about various different scandals of the development of various cars. The development of the DeLorean was definitely a scandal. A couple quick highlights. The designer of the DeLorean, John DeLorean, borrowed money from the British government in exchange for building the cars in Ireland. And it's actually reflected here. The VIN actually shows that these cars were built in the UK, in Ireland, which is really funny. A lot of people think that it's an American vehicle. Even though the designer is American, the cars were actually built in the UK. The whole thing ended when John DeLorean was trying to secure more funding for the project. He actually ended up being involved in trying to sell cocaine, and he got caught buying cocaine and being involved in a cocaine deal by the FBI and got arrested. So that was a whole thing. So that was the end of the DeLorean. So incredible story. I definitely recommend taking a closer look at it. But yeah, because of how the company was run and how they were constantly running out of money, and it was just such a huge project that involved a lot of R&D money. They just couldn't keep it running. So these cars are incredibly rare. It has a stainless steel body, which no one has ever tried before and hasn't tried since. It's very hard to maintain the body of that vehicle. There's no paint on it. They also had really weak engines. It's a 2.85 liter single overhead cam V6, and it produced 130 horsepower. So let that sit. And that was the top of the line engine as well. But the main selling point, of course, was those gull wing doors and the fact that it was in Back to the Future. So that's kind of where its street cred lies. But yeah, incredibly interesting history in the vehicle, and I expect it to go higher than it is right now. So that's it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment below, like, subscribe, yada yada. We'll see you next week, and hopefully we can get more videos out, and hopefully we can start filming cars soon instead of constantly doing podcasts. See you soon.